Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction and the invitation to give a talk here. So when Andrea emailed me last week to give a talk here, I thought, oh, what shall I talk about today? Well, my main research area is in security and cybercrime, but I thought there's a bit of elements in privacy that's quite pertinent in Internet of Things. So the title itself came from a little discussion or joke with a colleague, Radu Grigori, so I cannot take full credit of this. Radu was a postdoc here, I think, for a while at Queen Mary. So he remarked that the S in IoT is for security. Well, this is a kind of like a way of joking that, okay, there's often a lack of security in IoT, and similar way, sometimes privacy is not the first thing that comes naturally in the Internet of Things arena. So anyway, so that's a little background on why I give that title there. So we're all familiar with Internet of Things. Hamid earlier gave a nice overview of what is Internet of Things, what kind of data has been collected, and what kind of devices are involved. So I found this little image actually from Wikipedia that has a pretty good illustration of what might constitute Internet of Things. So various things like sensors in the home, home automation, smart home, things like wearable devices that people go to the gym, Fitbit, you can monitor how many steps you walk every day. Even plants, Hamid's got a picture of that as well, so I think there is very relevant. Now, the problem with that is there is some sort of loggerhead. The idea of privacy and Internet of Things sometimes seem to be at odds with each other. But let's have a look quickly at privacy here. What I look at privacy is a behavioral. It's multidimensional concept, and it's not very straightforward to address clearly. No solution fits everything. There are some various factors that might make it work for a certain situation, but in others it might not work very well. And I think the tendency is that individuals would like to customize privacy or manage how they share the information according to the context they're in. Okay. So, on the one hand, the success of IoT needs to rely on the abundance of data. This could be various types of data. Sensor data in particular is very common. You wear sensors everywhere. Your smartphone is a very good example of IoT device that you carry all the time. It has accelerometer, it has GPS and everything. And other user data is very common as well. Things you share on social media, for example. And we talk a lot about metadata in the morning as well. Information that is not necessarily the data, raw data that comes from the content of the email, for example, but instead it could be like who you send it to, what time you send the email, etc. Gives you a lot of various metadata that's valuable as well. Now, the concept of IoT seems to be at odds with privacy because end users might not be willingly engaged if there is not a lot of valuable information or valuable service they get from using IoT. But on the other hand, they will not be too happy if their data, their information, will be shared willy-nilly, if there is no protection on their data. If third party can too easily access the data and then, or some other people leak the information, they will not be too pleased with that. So it's a kind of trade-off involved in there. And this is something that as we wrap up the morning session, we had this idea that there is a kind of increased awareness among users, and users in particular, that there is an important aspect to consider when it comes to the privacy of the data. There are horror stories in popular media, like smart TV listening to your conversation that's meant to be private, or even in the case, I think it was with Amazon Alexa, that someone accidentally ordered dolls on the Amazon shopping site when they were talking about dolls. Some kids accidentally in the US ordered some toys because they were talking with this device listening. So another thing that could be an interesting aspect is what kind of values can we actually generate from the abundance, the richness of data we have here? So from end users' point of view, there's a kind of potential of incentive. They might be willing to share the data if they get something in return. We already do this, like with Facebook. We can use the service for free, but they collect some information about us. So one of the biggest challenges here is how we can actually pass the control back to the user. So this is still something that needs to be explored. So in the talk today, I'm not, so it's more like amusing in a sense. It's more like exploring what is out there. So I'm going to look at some of the papers that have been published in this area. I have a student, undergrad student, did a project with me from last year, and we look at the Internet of Things from the home automation point of view, and he looked at some ways of breaking into or revealing some security problems in that, which actually some of them reveal privacy issues as well, just to give a bit flavor of what I'm going to be talking about. So let's have a look at this example. Smart home kits. There are abundance of them. There are so many different types. We have several kits that we purchased last year. For example, Samsung has got the Smart Things, and Panasonic has their own. Another different company, Swan, for example, has got their own smart home kits. The main idea here is you have a hub in the home that allows you, using your smartphone, to control various elements of the home. For example, lights, cameras, security cameras, doors, even alarm systems. So it becomes, hopefully, easier for users at the home to customize their daily routine or automate them so that they don't need to think too much or spend too much effort to be able to use the devices. Now, this particular example is a Samsung one, I believe, and the way it communicates is by sending the information to the cloud owned by Samsung, and then the interaction is done through the cloud using the phone that the user has. Okay? Now, there are many, many nice features of this. For example, there is a platform available, not just for Samsung, but other devices as well, that allows multiple devices to be connected. So this allows new devices to be added, hundreds of different types of sensors, hundreds of different types of devices, from kettles to fridge to cameras. And also, third-party developers can create their own apps so that they can sell it to the customers if they want to customize their home a bit more a bit more specifically. And there is a shift here, because in the past, this kind of thing, this hobby of modifying your home is more like for the nerds, the geeks, the people who actually know how to program and things. But this becomes so much easier, so it becomes a commonplace so that people can just get this off the shelf and then just create the home that's controllable by your phone. So it provides kind of rich experience for the user, and of course it controls the home. But there are potential issues. In particular, we look at the issues with overprivilege of access to the IoT devices. Why do certain devices collect data? What else are they collecting without our knowledge? Because it is quite possible that when you install an app, for example, we talked about it at the end of the last session as well, that the user often have, in the past, they have only one choice: either install the app and accept the permission that the app requires, or don't install it. Now, there is a bit more granularity. You have options, especially with Android apps. You can choose whether you allow certain app to access your accelerometer, but not for others. So there's a bit more customization. So I think there is an improvement in terms of what is given back to the user, but there is still the issue that not everyone can just do it easily. There's a requirement that if you want to do that, you need to at least know a little bit what you're doing. Another thing we found out from, so this is most from the student project, was that the app source code is often unobfuscated. So you could actually reverse engineer things and get back some information that was not supposed to be seen. For example, some apps store the password for the Wi-Fi on the home in the clear. So if some attacker get access to your phone, okay, that's one condition anyway, but you could reverse engineer that and find out the password from the app. So that's an issue with some of the apps out there. Another thing, before I move to the next slide, another thing that was an issue is that often people do not bother to patch their system, which, well, okay, it's a bit of a hassle. There are some auto-patching, but not everything supports that. And with some of the home kits we have seen, the Panasonic one, for example, it has the vulnerability that an attacker could take over control of it. But this vulnerability has been patched for later versions. But the question is, do everyone patch their system? So that's another potential issue that needs to be addressed. So just to give a kind of a landscape of what are the threats in IoT, I look at this paper by Siegeldorf from 2014. They classify that there are 7 potential threats. The paper, I will have the list of the paper at the end of the slides if you're interested to read more. The first thing is about identifications. It's quite obvious. Having your data shared potentially could lead to identifying you. Not necessarily directly your name, but maybe where you live, or based on the characteristic, people can derive that. Localization and tracking, that's another feature of GPS. It's very helpful, especially if you are in a foreign place, unusual place. Like today, I just came in, I had to turn on my location to find out where the building is. I probably could have used a normal map, but it's handy. Profiling. So companies in particular are interested about what you're buying, what you're searching online, so that they can create a profile of you, so that they can target their advertising. Interaction and presentation. This is, you could kind of compare it with like shoulder surfing. What kind of information is presented to you might actually reveal too much about you. For example, it's an interesting idea that if you are going to a shop or a shopping center, there might be some personalized screen so that they know you're looking for shoes, for example, and then people can just, the screen can just suggest this shoe shop has got offer on boots or something like that. So you can just walk in, I can just go to this shop. But at the same time, people can just look at what you're interested as well. So there's an issue of that. Lifecycle transitions. So when the device has come to its useful end for you, there's still potentially data that is in there that someone else might be able to find values of. For example, if you have an old camera, you're selling it to eBay or whatever, some of your photos, some of your history might be there, so that someone else could see what your data is like. Inventory attacks, this could be related to more physical attack of your home, for example. If you have smart monitoring kits at home, they might be able to tell that, okay, this person has this big TV. This person has got expensive fridge and things like that. So an attacker could create an inventory of what is valuable that they can steal, for example. Linkage is more or less how all this information could be combined together so that the potentially malicious outsider can find out more about you, what you like, what you do, etc., and then mount various other threats accordingly. Okay, so there are, sorry, that's probably a bit close. There are some potential solutions out there. The common solutions are cryptographic techniques and information manipulation, so that your data is potentially encrypted, so it's not easy for anyone else to just read your data. Or it might be some data minimization, so that there's some element of your data is being stripped out so that it doesn't contain the full context of information. Privacy and context awareness is one that is important, and people, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, people start to become more aware of this, and people are doing that. Access control is another thing that allows you as an owner to give a customized permission to various types of the data. With Android phone, for example, you can specify your access permission to the sensor at app level, so that one app might be allowed to read your accelerometer, but another app cannot. Or you could just turn it off altogether for everything, so that you can hide a little bit. Some of these can be potentially done without human involvement, so it's purely technical solution. So having the encryption, for example, and data minimization could be done as a kind of algorithm that doesn't require much of human. But some others are likely will involve human, so the owner, the user, will have to be actively in control of that. But one of the challenges or the issues we have is very often the solutions that are out there seem to be designed with an assumption that users are actually willingly going to spend effort to prefer or improve their privacy. Okay, in ideal world, yes, everyone would like to do that, but in some cases, some people probably not very sure how to do that, or they just don't care. It's just like, okay, this is a common excuse, which is a weak excuse. They said, oh, I've got nothing to hide. I don't need to worry about this. So it's you know, people out there still consider that. So when it comes to the designing of solution for the user, we need to take into account that there are different types of users, and we cannot just put them all in the same shoe that everyone will just put their best effort to actually get their privacy. So it's just a quick overview, and maybe gives a chance for a talk, ideas of maybe some sort of controversial ideas here and there that provoke discussion. But I'll come back to the beginning of the morning when Mark mentioned about the trade-off. There's a lot of trade-off involvement here as well, between privacy and convenience, for example. With IoT, there are other challenges. There's no clear boundaries with devices are potentially connectable from everywhere. There is no clear areas that this device is only in this home. People can access it from outside, from across the world, potentially. And another issue here is that IoT devices tend to have limited resources. So some of the technological solution that we try to do, for example, encryption, might not work too well on such constrained devices, or it might come at a cost of slower performance, or the users just find it not responsive. Another thing that has been observed in one of the papers I was reading is that issues on IoT security seems to be more pressing and get more coverage than those regarding privacy. So, of course, security and privacy tend to go together, but there are slightly different focus of research. And so far, things related to security seems to be getting more coverage, more efforts. A big example recently was the Mirai botnet. So this is a case where quite a lot of IoT cameras were compromised because they were using default passwords, they had telnet port open, that the criminals can use a botnet to control these devices to mount distributed denial of service attack. The source code of Mirai has been made available. I haven't got a copy, but I'm sure you can find it, but be careful. Another issue that is common with IoT devices, that's more to do with security, is that they often have default passwords, and people do not change them. People just keep the password as it is. And as such, there is a list of known passwords out there. People can just find it, and then you are at the risk of being compromised. And I already mentioned about unpatched devices. As one of the pressing issues about IoT is that the producers, the developers of IoT devices tend to try to get the market quickly. There's a niche market. There's a time pressure. If you don't get in there, my rival will get it. So, so they tend to just get it out. Let's worry about security later, which is not the right approach, in my opinion. So how do we put the P in IoT then? It's not going to be a straightforward answer, but it would be good if you as a user, when you are buying a device or IoT device, you should know first what data are actually being recorded. You might want to also know what data are being protected by the device, either on the device itself, maybe being encrypted on the device, or during transmission, when you send, because the nature of IoT, there's always communication with other devices. How is the communication done between devices? With a student for the project last year, I was looking, well, he was looking into what kind of ways can you actually eavesdrop on the communication. Some of the, because they communicate with radio, there are many different technologies they use, from Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, etc. Some of them have got encryption, so it's not easy to actually eavesdrop on the communication, but some others do not have encryption, so you could just listen, replay, attack, etc., and eavesdrop. Another thing that I would like to highlight is if we can allow end users to configure their privacy preference easily, then we might actually be able to improve the privacy situations here. In particular, developers of privacy solutions, IoT or otherwise, need to know what actually the capabilities of their user, what actually are the users willing to do in terms of the effort they can expend in achieving the privacy. Okay, so I'll end up with a little comic that actually link up with another research that I'm interested in. Is this ransomware. So this was this comic came out when the ransomware attack on the NHS happened, like about a month ago. There's a potential for instead of Internet of Things, it's Internet of Ransomware things. So that if you have a smart fridge and you want to get some food from there, you have to pay first, otherwise you can't eat. Or the cooker will just blow dirt and things like that. So it's a bit of a joke, but I think it's quite pertinent to the issue. I think that's it, and there's just some references that you're interested to find out more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Budi. So now we not only know what the P is in IoT, but also what the R is in IoT.
You can substitute with anything.
Any questions?
Hi, Stefan.
Hi, Stefan. Yes, thank you.
I think one challenge maybe is an impossible challenge, that there are so many heterogeneous things, there's so many heterogeneous ways they're connected, there's so many heterogeneous things that we do. It may be impossible really to have any kind of like end-to-end security, or privacy is the first comment. And then the second comment, I think your talk focused more on kind of like personalized things, or things that are in your like private space, so your home app, that sort of thing. But what about things that are in public spaces which are profiling you? The lamppost that you go past, maybe they could like collect, look and scan what devices you have on you, and then profile you based upon those. That would need like a different security and privacy. So those two challenges, do you see a way out of the heterogeneity, and do you see what we could, is there anything we need to additionally do, because a lot of devices we interact with are not personal?
Thank you, Stefan. And I agree, let's go for the second question first. I agree with you. Most of the things I'll talk about here were to do with personal things. There are potential of devices collecting your information as you walk. In fact, an example was the personalized shopping kind of advertisement thing. It could be possible to actually get your information as you walk along the shopping center. I do agree, it's an issue. It's not just about personal surrounding, personal environment, but it's a bigger picture, or even in the context of smart cities, smart everything is connected together. So your travel, for example, it knows what routes you normally take, what kind of speed you go for normally, etc. So there is a big picture that needs to be considered. I definitely agree with that. And come to the first question, well, there is, again, a kind of conflict of interest, because on the one hand, these companies who make IoT devices, they often tend to keep their own system. There are some alliance of several big manufacturers who try to create a standard for their platform so that they can interoperate quite easily. But there are quite a lot of these standards. So I don't know if there is an easy answer to that in terms of how we can get everyone talk together in one kind of secure way. So it's a, yeah, I don't have the answer. It's a challenge.
Thanks for your interest.
My pleasure.
Well, I'm sure you probably have heard of the internet background radiation or background noise.
Okay.
This is just the port scannings and all these unsolicited packets. So do you think that with Internet of Things, that our kettles and everything is going to become part of the internet? This is going to essentially maybe kill...
Your Internet of Things is alive, it's just come out.
Maybe it becomes so loud, this background noise, that it maybe suffocate the whole internet. Do you think that's...
I don't think it would kind of kill the internet as such. True that there are so many devices and there's a lot of data being sent back and forth, but a lot of these tend to be on a slightly smaller scale network, so it's a bit more maybe a home network, it's a bit less than getting everything. Well, there is probably a hub in the home that allows the connection outside. There's a way of controlling it through there so that it doesn't kind of contaminate everything. But as demonstrated by the botnets, the risk here is that some malicious attacker or criminals can control sufficiently large amounts of Internet of Things devices in thousands or 100,000s and do the distributed denial of service attack. In a sense, it will be like loud noise that can kill the internet, because if, for example, they attack DNS server, like what happened a few months ago with DIN being killed by the denial of service, it did affect a lot of other infrastructure or other applications. For example, DIN was knocked out and it affected Twitter or Spotify, a few other services, so it's a big issue. So I don't have the answer to that, but it's an issue that is very well known. It's like denial of service is not easy to answer. Is that answering your question a little bit?
So is it just say maybe before privacy becomes the biggest bottleneck of Internet of Things, maybe as you said, security, and just as simple as denial of service kind of background attacks.
A way of detecting this early is one of the kind of proposed solutions, so that they can reconfigure the network to pass the traffic, for example, the request to DDoS request or attack into the sinkhole, basically, just to push them away from the real traffic. So yeah, I'm not an expert in DDoS kind of countermeasures, but
but the thing is, we know these countermeasures are already, like, the biggest engines of DDoS are just these webcams that someone has installed.
So the best approach that as an end user can do is patch. We know this with malware, in general, even ransomware. If you patch, make sure that vulnerabilities are not there anymore. You're protecting yourself and protecting others from being a victim.
Any other questions? If not, we thank again, Budi. Thank you.
Okay.